Hello, this is Tom, and I'm going to give I'll walk through a demonstration of doing Intersite stock transfers in Sage X3. Sage X3 is multi-company, multi-site software, and so we can create as many sites as we want within each company. We have as many companies as we want within our folder. And then, of course, we sometimes need to move stock between sites. And so in X3, there's two ways to transfer inventory. There's a quick way, a quick method, a short form is what I call it. That's an immediate transaction. I go in, enter my details, and stock is immediately updated at both sites. There's also a long form transfer that tracks in-transit stock, creates bills awaiting, does more of a formal process. And some companies need this, especially if your sites are long distance apart and the transfer is not done in the same day. You might want to track that in-transit inventory. Otherwise, if you don't track in-transit inventory and you're doing cycle counting or things like that, or looking at available stock, X3 will say that stock's available, but it might be sitting on a truck somewhere, and it might be 3 days out of your warehouse. So we can use the long form to actually track that in-transit stock, and I'll show that as well. Um, so in X3, we can do that immediate transfer, and we're going to do that. So we're going to be working with these two sites, NA011, NA012. If I go look at our detail, I have a product that we'll be using, this PNH product, which is a pallet. And you can see that our stock by site screen, we have our two sites, NA011, Nova Scotia, NA012, St. Quentin. And in our Nova Scotia site, we have 1,741 units on hand, and we're going to ship some of those over to NA012 site. So let's go in and just do the easy one first. Let's go ahead and create our immediate transfer, the short form transfer. So I can go in and do my Intersite transfer screen, and this is just a one entry, one step process. I just go in, I'm going to create a new transfer. I give it my site that I am shipping from, NA011. I can fill in some of this information. I have to give it a destination site. This is where it's going to. And then I have to specify my product. And then I can use the stock selection to choose the stock line that I am shipping from. So in this situation, let's say we're going to ship 4, and we're going to ship them out of this location from our source warehouse. I click on this line, it adds 4 down here, and then I can fill in all the destination details down here. I can fill in my destination status. So if it needs to go into quality control at the other warehouse, I can actually put it into quarantine when it gets received at the other site. I'm going to leave it as A status, available, but then I also can specify the storage location at the other side. And sometimes if this might be just a generic location and they can do a transfer after they get the product at their site, but I'm just going to choose a actual put away location, NA Stow 905, and then I'm done. So this was one item. I can actually go ahead and put another item. Once I get everything filled out on my first item, I can change this item number. Whoops, too many digits there. And this is my cordless mouse. I have 812 on hand. I can click on that, but I don't want to transfer all 812. I actually can come down here and change my I can actually change my quantity. Instead of 812, I'm going to ship 5 of those. And then again, I can change my destination status if I wish, and I can change my destination location. So let's put this into maybe 913 location. So I specify everything on the destination side, and then when I'm all done, when I have all my products added, I click on the Create button. And you notice on my stock on hand, as we're looking at, we had 1741 here. Now when we go ahead and do this, we're moving 4 to the other location. So then we should see that updated on my stock by site screen. So I'm going to go ahead and create my stock transfer. Hit the Create button. I'll get my document number here in a second. 004, and if I come back over here, refresh my screen, you can see the on-hand quantities have been updated. I now have 4 units at NA012, my St. Quentin site, and my Nova Scotia site has been decremented from 1741 to 1737. So that's the immediate, the quick, the fast Intersite transfer, and I'm done. I don't need to do anything else. So that does fit some people, and And like I said, if it's like your truck or a local delivery that's within the same day, maybe that's sufficient. Maybe that's all you need to do. A lot of people though need that longer method of tracking in transit stock to know that it's unavailable for a couple of days as being shipped across the state or across the country or to a different region. So let's walk through and look at that. So first of all, what I am going to show is a image from the X3 documentation, the distribution manual, Intersite and intercompany overview. And I just wanted to show this graphic real quick because this is a multi-step process. We're creating multiple documents within X3 to do this long form Intersite transfer. What we do is we do a purchase order at our destination site, and that purchase order is referencing our sister site that we're getting the product from. And then we have a mirror image of that purchase order, which is a sales order, which is selling it to the other site. So site A does a purchase order and it references site B as a supplier. Site B creates a sales order and they say the customer is site A. And then once we get the purchase order and the sales order created, we actually deliver that sales order. We create that delivery, which is the trigger in X3. X3 knows that that's an Intersite transfer delivery, and it puts that inventory in transit. And then when that truck pulls up to Site A warehouse, we do a purchase receipt at Site A to actually formally check that inventory in and get it out of the in-transit bucket. Now, this purchase order and sales order are mirror images of each other. Well, X3 does the automatic creation of the sales order, so you don't have to create that sales order because it should be just the same line item, same quantities as the purchase order. We just are referencing a different site, a different customer on that sales order. So X3 does that for us automatically. And I'm going to show you how we set that up. So there's really 4 steps to this transfer: purchase order, sales delivery, purchase receipt, but we only need to do 3 of them. We need to do the purchase order, the sales delivery when we ship it out of our facility, and we do the purchase receipt when we receive it into our Site A facility. The sales order we never need to touch, we never need to do anything with. X3 maintains that automatically for us. So let me show you how we set this up in X3 first of all. So let's go look at our business partners. Now, as we saw, we have the 2 sites. We have our site record NA011, NA012. We have to create business partners that correspond to those sites, and those business partners are suppliers and customers. So let's go look at our Intersite business partners that we've set up, and I'll show you how we set those up to link those to a site. So we actually have a search here. Oh, it's not showing everything. I want to find my NA011s. So here is my NA011 business partner, and they are set up with both a customer role and a supplier role. Same thing as NA012. And what this lets us do is it lets us ship back and forth. If we go back to our graphic real quick, our site B is doing a sales order, and so the customer on this sales order is site A. But sometimes we want to reverse this. We might want to ship from site B to site A. So typically when we set these business partners up, we set them up in both roles, customers and suppliers, so we can ship, receive both directions. And this is a one-time setup. Obviously, I create a site, I create the business partner, create a customer, create a supplier, and then I don't have to touch this again. It's done. So this is a one-time setup. But we do set them up both directions so we can ship and receive any direction we want to go. Now here's the key for setting these up as Intersites. I'm going to drill into my business partner, my customer business partner for NA011. And there's a flag on here that we identify this customer as being related to a site. And that's the key of linking the customer to the site and making it an Intersite customer rather than just a normal outside customer. And that's just a little flag right here. When I create this customer, I always use the same code as the site. So our site code is NA011. I'd want to create the customer with the same exact code, so I don't have to remember multiple codes for the site. It's always the same when I'm entering them on a sales order or purchase order, and I'll show you that in a second. But the key of setting up this customer as Intersite is this checkbox right here. I check this, then I link this to the site, and like I said, I'm using the same code for the site and the customer, so they correspond identically. And so this customer is linked to the site. So when I enter a sales order for this customer X3 is going to know that that sales order is an Intersite transfer automatically. So that's really all I have to do is check this box and link it to a site. If I go back and look at the supplier side of this, so our NA011 business partner, let's look at the supplier role. Click on supplier. Bring up our supplier screen. There's an exact same checkbox, Intersite. And of course, we're going to use the same code again. So NA011 is a supplier number. Intersite is checked, and here's the site they're linked to. Now I can use a different code for my supplier or my customer if I wanted to, but that just makes things even more confusing. So let's keep it simple. Supplier code, site code are always the same. And then it's the same for NA012. We have site 0 NA012, business partner number, customer supplier. They have Intersite ticked, and the site code is matched. So basically for all our sites, we create a business partner, a customer, and supplier for that site. That's a one-time setup, and then we're done. Now there's one more thing that we do when we set this up. There's a rule in X3 that we need to create to do the automatic transaction generation, and that's this intercompany parameter screen. So here's where we can set up all our rules for all our sites, all our companies. We can set up intercompany parameters, and this is where we can automatically create the offsetting documents. But on this first one, I have an Intersite type is Intersite. And if you notice here, I don't have any source company or source site, no target company, no target site. So this is a global rule for everything within the folder. And I'm saying that whenever I enter a purchase order, link that to a sales order, and this authorization right here, this can be either yes or no. And typically if we create this rule, we're going to say yes. What that means, create the sales order automatically. So X3, whenever I create a purchase order that's Intersite, it's going to look up in this table, it's going to see that, it's going to find this rule, and it says, yep, automatically create the sales order. Now price transfer, we have the option here. For Intersite, we don't worry about price transfers because we're not actually creating a sales invoice or a purchase invoice. We're just moving inventory from one site to another. There's no due to or due from a receivable or payable generated with an Intersite transaction. If it was an intercompany transaction, we could create a supplier invoice and a customer invoice or a sales invoice, but for Intersite we don't do that, so the price transfer doesn't matter for Intersite transactions. So I just want to point that out real quick. So let's go back out. And so now our setup is done. We have our business partners created, our customers and suppliers are linked to our sites. We have our rule in place in X3, and we have some stock over here. So let's go ahead and create this long form, this formal, I guess I call it a formal transfer where we're tracking in-transit stock. So what we do is we create the purchase order, and we have the rule set up to automatically create the offsetting sales order. So let's see this actually work. So I'm going to go into the purchase order screen, and I'm going to create a purchase order, and I really don't do anything different. My ordering site, I'm ordering to NA012, that's my destination site. And notice this checkbox right here, Intersite. It's kind of grayed out. We can't change this. X3 maintains this field automatically. Right now it's clear, but when I type in my supplier number, and this is an Intersite supplier, X3 toggles this check mark and says, hey, we're doing an Intersite transfer. It knows something's different. It's going to do what it needs to do behind the scenes to handle this Intersite transfer for us. So I really don't do anything different. I choose my site, I choose my supplier. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to put in my line items, my P&H pallet number. Let's ship 10 of those to our other site. Again, let's just add another line item just to show that we can add as many products as we want. Let's ship 6 of those. And we can keep on building this purchase order. We can put as many lines out here as we want. Just looking for, there's some volume calculations, and I might have that suppressed on this screen because obviously I'd want to, if I'm doing a transfer and it's my truck, I might want to fill up that truck. I might want to put enough on there so we can track what that volume is. I just have those fields hidden on the screen, I believe, but they are available for display if we need those. But let's go ahead and create this purchase order. So I'm going to hit the create button. Now X3 is going to do another step behind the scenes, and it's going to create that sales order. You see this message right here, created sales order, and it created sales order, is it 333? It did that automatically for us. And if I look down here at the bottom, they're actually linking this purchase order, sales order together. So if I look under my acknowledgement notes, I can see that it's an Intersite order, and I actually see the sales order it created here, and I actually can jump into the sales order from here. So let's go up here and look at this. This is purchase order 108. So I can actually jump into my sales order, and you'll notice on the sales order it's referring back to this purchase order number through the PO field on the sales order. Here's my PO number, and it has our purchase order number that it's linked to. And you can see, look at this, this is the opposite of the purchase order. On the purchase order, our site was NA0112. On our sales order, it flipped it around. Our sales site is NA011. This is where we're shipping from, and our sold to is now our destination site, NA012. So X3 knows to flip these fields around, and our sales order is going to our destination site. But everything else on the purchase order is pretty straightforward. We have all the line items for the purchase order transferred over, and our quantities 10 and 6 are over there. And that's it. So our purchase order created our sales order for us, so we don't have to do anything. Now, one thing I'll note is that this purchase order, I can come in and change this purchase order. I can have other people update this purchase order if they have other things they need to get delivered from the other site. If you change the line items on this purchase order, X3 is going to delete that sales order and create a new sales order that'll match this purchase order. And I can keep on doing that up until the time I create the sales delivery from that sales order. Once I create that sales delivery from that sales order, X3 is going to lock this purchase order and not let me make changes. So the point is, you can create this purchase order on Monday, you can keep on adding to it, changing it every day, and then maybe on Friday is your other site's going to ship it, then this purchase order would be locked. But you can keep on changing this purchase order, or you can create a different purchase order every time you have another product that you want to create. We could create multiple sales orders, and then you could pull those sales orders into one delivery if you wish, and I'll show you that in a second. So anyway, the point is that this purchase order is maintained by X3, and it maintains that link to that sales order, and it'll update or delete and recreate new sales orders as this purchase order is changed. But other than that, it's just like entering a normal purchase order. It's just this flag is maintained by X3, then X3 knows it has to do extra work in the background to keep that sales order updated. So now this purchase order is done, 108, 10 and 6. Now let's go look at our stock on hand. Let me refresh this. We have nothing in transit yet because we actually haven't shipped anything yet. All we did was created that purchase order, sales order. We have not done anything yet, so nothing isn't in transit yet. So say now the day comes and we're ready to ship that sales order. Let's go ahead and do that. So I would go into our delivery screen. I could bring up that sales order, then create delivery, or I can just go in my delivery screen and create a new delivery and then pull in that sales order. So let's do that. So I'm going to create a new delivery. I'm saying I'm shipping from my source site, which is Nova Scotia, NA011, and then I'm saying my ship to is NA012, and then I can go choose my orders. So here's all my transfer orders that are going to that customer. Now the one we just created was the 333 that had the 10 and 6 units, 10 pallets, 6 of the DIS 004. But here's what I was saying, if I had multiple sales orders out there, I could pull all these sales orders into this delivery, or certain line items into this delivery. I'm going to pull in just that 333, those 2 line items, into our delivery. So it brought everything in. Of course, I can change my quantities. Anything I do to a normal delivery, I can do in here. So it's just a normal delivery as far as that's concerned. A couple things I need to fill in. I didn't put a carrier or delivery method in on the sales order. I don't have anything defaulting. So before I do a bill of lading, I actually need to fill that in. And then let's just choose a carrier. I'll just choose yellow freight lines. So my delivery mode is ground, carrier is yellow freight. I'm going to go ahead and create this delivery. Let it update. And then I can generate my bill of lading if I need to. If I don't need a bill of delivery, if I don't need a bill of lading, or I don't need a packing slip, I can just go ahead and validate this and be done with it. But if I do need a bill of lading, I can go in the bill of lading window. And of course, it brings all these line items in from our delivery. Now I don't have my inventory set up correctly yet. I don't have a default packaging on those items, so I didn't fill in a couple pieces of information here. But obviously, if the item master is filled in correctly, I do not need to do this editing. They would fill them in automatically. and then I would not have to do this extra step here. But I go ahead and create my bill of lading. Now, of course, you might have different packaging, and so you can change this, but you always want to probably have the defaults coming in from your item master, and you only change it if you have something unusual going on with that product. So when this is all done, I can go ahead and obviously print my bill of lading. I'll just use the standard X3 bill of lading. Whoops, need to click on record. Bill of lading, print this. And then we'll look at this real quick. So here's just our normal bill of lading coming out of X3, and it has our line items on there. Pretty straightforward. And I'm done with my bill of lading. Go back to my delivery. One thing I'll note, so we've created our delivery, we print our bill of lading. We could print our packing slip if we wanted to, email packing slip, print it out. But at this point, still nothing has been done with inventory. Nothing's been touched, just like a normal delivery. Until we validate that delivery, nothing changes. But let's go ahead and validate that. We printed our paperwork, everything is good to go. The truck is loaded, it's pulling away from our dock. We go and hit the validation button, and this is going to update our inventory now at this point and make some GL postings as well. Now the validation is done. Now if I go back and look at my stock by site, I should see 10 units move into in-transit. Search 10 units in transit, and my internal stock at NA011 went from 1737 down to 1727. So it's decremented my source site and it's put into in-transit stock at my destination site. One note, so in X3 you can create a different GL account for in-transit stock. You don't have to use a different account. You could use your finished goods GL account for that, but X3 does allow you to use a different GL account. And when I do that Intersite transfer and I hit the delivery validation, X3 is going to move the cost of that product to that in-transit account. And of course it's tracking in-transit stock as well. It's not internal stock yet, so if I do a cycle count, if I look at what I have available to ship, this 10 units is not in my inventory yet, so I can't allocate it, I can't issue it to a work order, I can't ship it out to a customer. I have to close out this in-transit stock, put it into inventory, then I can use it. So X3 is tracking this inventory. It is owned by this site, NA012, but it is not actually in that site's available stock yet. So our delivery is done. One thing I'll note is that we did the delivery validation. Typically on a normal delivery, when you do the validation, you get the invoice button. You can create the sales invoice for that transaction. We do not have that option on Intersite delivery because there is no invoice generated. X3 knows that this transaction is over, so it doesn't give you the option of creating the invoice. If this was an intercompany delivery, then yes, you could create the invoice either manually or you could use the automated tools on the X3 to create that sales invoice. But the point is that we're done with this delivery side of the transaction. Now notice all we had to do is we had to go into delivery, create a new delivery, refer to the sales orders for that customer, pull in our sales order. We had the option of printing a bill of lading. We could print the packing slip as well, but then we validated that delivery. So it's a pretty quick process depending on what documents you need, but we need to actually formally do this delivery and the validation to update inventory and put that inventory into in-transit mode. So now this site NA01 is done. The only thing they had to do was go in and create the delivery and validate delivery and possibly create the bill of lading. That's all they have to do. They're done. The sales order was created automatically by X3, and so we just have to pull that stock, put it on a truck, create our paperwork, and then tell X3 it's been shipped. So now we're done. And we have our in-transit stock. And now what's going to happen is that truck's going to go across the state, across the region, across the country to wherever, and it's going to drop that product off. And then when it drops that product off, I need to do a purchase receipt to put it into my inventory. And so that's just a normal step after doing my purchase order. I just do a normal receiving document. There's one little twist to the receiving document that I'll show you. So let's go in and do this transaction. So I go into receiving and I create a purchase receipt just like I normally would. I'm receiving this into site 012. And my supplier was my sister site, NA011, so I choose that. And then typically what I would do is go choose the PO. But in this situation, it's not a PO that I choose, it's the delivery that I choose. I choose the delivery that I just created, which was SDI NA0110004. So I don't choose a purchase order, I choose the delivery, and then everything that's on that delivery gets brought into my purchase receipt. So I bring this in, and then I have my 10 and my 6. I could change my quantity. If something fell off the truck or damage, I could change my quantity. Now that's going to kind of mess up your inventory if I change this, because I shipped 6 and 10 out of one warehouse. I should be receiving 6 and 10 out of the other warehouse. But this is just a normal purchase receipt. The normal things that you would do on a receipt you probably would do. You want to make sure it's the right item number, the right quantity, there's no damage. So this is just a normal receiving process. The only thing I do differently is I choose delivery instead of order selection. Other than that, it's just a normal receiving process. So if everything looks good, my quantities are entered, I go ahead and create this document. So again, let's just refresh the screen. We have 10 in transit. Now when I receive this in, I create this purchase receipt. Let it go ahead and update. We have receipt 006. Now let's refresh our stock by site screen. Search again. And now we have that 10 is moved from in transit to my internal stock, and now it's available stock as well. So that closes the loop on our transaction. If I go back to my map, we created the purchase order. X3 created the sales order. Then we created the sales delivery. And then when the truck drops off the inventory at my destination warehouse, I do the purchase receipt to move it out of in transit and put it into my available inventory. So we have to do 3 steps, 3 transactions basically in X3. We create a purchase order, we create a sales delivery to put it into in transit mode, and we do a purchase receipt when that truck gets dropped off. The sales order is created, but it's created automatically by X3. We do create dashboards with these sales orders and purchase orders to know what I need to ship and what I need to receive for Intersite transfers, because you kind of want to manage those. But and that's sometimes we use notifications as well. Whenever I create this purchase order for Intersite, we might send an email over to the operations people at Site B to say, hey, Site A has requested an Intersite transfer. But we can set up those rules, dashboards, emails, alerts, however you want to notify people within your organization. But that's all just normal X3 tools that we kind of implement to facilitate notification, communication, and whatnot. But that is the steps to do the long transfer in X3. It gives you all the control that you need to create all the paperwork that you need for that transfer, and also to track what's in transit versus what's available for selling immediately. But it all starts with creating that purchase order, Intersite purchase order, by specifying a Intersite supplier number. A couple other things. Let's just go and look at our order status for this purchase order. We can see here's our purchase order and the receipt number, just as normal. It's just a normal receipt. It doesn't look any different than a normal purchase order and a receipt. Journal traceability, kind of the same as we normally see, just the purchase order and the purchase receipt. It doesn't really look any different than a normal receipt. So X3 treats these transactions as Intersite transactions, but they're just really normal transactions as far as the system's concerned. It's just X3 knows in the background that you're not going to get an invoice for this purchase order because that was an Intersite transfer. Same thing with the sales order, sales delivery. There's not going to be a sales invoice generated that kind of caps that transaction after the inventory movement. So this was Tom. Again, I was showing Intersite transfers in X3, both the quick form, which is the immediate step, and then the long form, which is a multi-step, multi-transaction scenario to give you more control, and generates the paperwork that you may need, and to track inventory that's in transit as well. So thanks for watching. Hope that was informative.